because, and I like to think it's auspicious because I remember Ron hosted a fundraiser for Martin Heinrich in this very place. Uh, uh, I think it was before he won the primary, so it's a good sign. It's a good omen. You know, I jumped in this race when Senator Bingaman left. Nobody knew that it was going to be an open seat. I wasn't planning on it. You know, Kim and I had a few things going on, a wedding to plan, you know, like a trip outside the country. But I thought it was important because we need people who are willing to step up and get in the fight for working families and for the middle class and for kids in this community. And so we talked about it, and I stepped in. And it hasn't been easy. It's not going to be easy. It's a huge sacrifice for those of you in public office. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of time that your family has to support you away from the things you normally do. Financially, I don't know anybody who actually doesn't go into a lot of debt running for office, especially for Congress. But I was born and raised in this neighborhood and in this district, and I think we need leadership that really will take the story of kids like me and families like we see around here to Washington. You know, I grew up right down here, went to public school my whole life, went to Barelas Community Center for summer programs where I got lunch and where I had something to do that was positive, went to Dolores Gonzalez right here, went to Washington until I got in trouble, and then I had to go to St. Mary's for 2 years, but that's not on the bio. Then Albuquerque High, and then, you know, public university. And I guess the basic reason why I'm running is because I think we have to remember that we are a community. This is a proud community. And we have two very different ideas of where America's going. Mark likes to call it the public good, which is, do we, as a community, believe that all of us are in this together, that it's not the law of the jungle, every man for himself, dog eat dog, only the strong survive, which is the view that a lot of people, especially on the right, they happen to be running the Congress right now. That's what they believe. That if the Wall Street, corporate America, millionaires, that's who should be calling the shots. And they've tried to marginalize some of the protests, and they've tried to say, oh, those people are just a bunch of hippies or malcontents or whatever. But what they don't realize is when we walk out there, these are families, these are teachers, these are veterans, these are public employees, and all they want is what we all say we believe in, which is the American dream. You know, a chance that your kids are going to do better than you did, that we are a community and we invest together in what's good for all of us. Not just for the few. I just came from a National Education Association conference, and there was data about who's getting educated and how much education costs and what's happening to public education. And we are actually spending less now than we did in the 80s on public education. And yet we're at the most unequal we've been since before the Great Depression in terms of the richest folks and the poorest folks. So if we're going to turn the country around, you need warriors. Those of you who know me politically, I've been called a lot of things, but a wallflower is not one of them. I am not, it's not always easy to take on the fight that we have to take on for working families or for unions who help build the middle class, or to stand up to oil and gas when we say there's another way to create jobs in renewable energy, or to say, no, we shouldn't cut education. It's not right to cut education. Everybody says they're pro-education, but when it comes to actually putting more money into education, even a lot of Democrats get weak-kneed when it talks about, are you willing to ask people to pay a little bit more money to put in education? So this race is really about two paths. Are we in this together? Are we a community? Is there a public good? Or is it every man for himself? You're on your own. Good luck. If you're a senior and you got Social Security, be happy, because the next generation of seniors may or may not have it. They may work their whole life, and they may not get it. Or they may get a reduced amount. And you may have Medicare the next generation, or you may not. Just hope you're one of those people who doesn't have a chronic illness. Just hope that you draw the good straw, right? And you may be a kid whose parents can afford private school or private daycare. Good on you if you did it, right? But if you're not, and you're a kid like I was, there's no good. We can't really afford those Head Starts or those, you know, after-school programs that are going to help everybody succeed and appreciate the American dream. So those are the two visions. I think most of us here believe that we are a community, that we are in this together, that we all succeed together, and that it shouldn't be reserved for those derivative managers, those corporate CEOs, and the millionaires who could afford to do well. And it's time we change that. So I'm running to change that. I'm going to be one guy out of 435 if I get elected. And one guy's not going to change it. But if I can help this president stand up a little stronger to some of the forces on the right, challenge him and challenge my own party to do the right thing, then I'll feel like I will have done at least something positive for the country. So that's what I'm here today to do. Here's the good news. People are responding to this. You know, when there's 3 of us in the Democratic primary, everybody said, "Oh my God, you know, how are you going to do it? You're too progressive." And well, guess what? We set a national record for having more donors than any challenger anywhere in the country. 10,000 donors. 10,000 donors. Average contribution of $25. We've been endorsed by the chairman of the Progressive Caucus, one of the leading voices for working families in the United States Congress, Raul Grijalva. He happily endorsed us. He publicly endorsed us. The Public Employees Union has endorsed us, the 2nd largest union in the state. And the conservation voters have endorsed me. And the reason is, like Ike and Miguel and a lot of other folks, we've always placed the good of all of us and the bosque and our natural places over oil and gas and over those with a lot of power. So if you hadn't seen the news, we've raised more money than anybody in the race. Cool. The difference is the average contribution for us is about $25 to $30. And I'm proud that Miguel and Ike and Ray Garduño and about 25 other local elected officials, not national guys, and Raul's great, but I don't have mayors of big cities endorsing me or famous actors endorsing me. You know who is endorsing me? Everybody from Miguel to Eleanor Chavez to Mimi Stewart to the chairman of the Education Committee, Cynthia Nava, people who are doing the hard work of making progressive change in this state, and I'm very proud of that. And so the last thing I'll say is it's 8 months away. So everybody's like, 8 months? You know, it's an eternity. We're getting started early because, number one, it's what Martin did, and it's how he won this seat. So he understood, like I understood, that when people say you're too progressive, you're too pro-environment, you're too you pass the minimum wage, you're out of step with the mainstream, the minimum wage is out of step with the mainstream. Somehow, you know, that was Martin's big thing that I worked on with him. And I disagree. I think you get started early, you tell people what you believe, you run on your record, you surround yourself with good people who care about the community. I don't think there's any corporate lobbyists here, but if you are, welcome.
We'll take your check.
But let me just tell you 2 things. We're going to win the primary. We raise more money, more donors, more endorsements, and we have more support than anybody in the race, including some pretty big-name people who are in this race. Number 2, we're going to win the general. And let me tell you why. A lot of people think, well, if we got to get someone who kind of looks like the Republican, but just a little bit nicer, right? You know, just a little bit nicer, maybe not quite as right-wing, you know, but that's how we win the district, because that's the myth of this district. It's a swing district. Well, there's only 2 problems with that theory. Number 1, the congressman who represents it now came out of the environmental movement, and he was he had an identical voting record to me and Ike and Miguel and all the other good progressives in elected office. He just worked hard, and he was smart enough. And he couldn't be defined up by just being an environmentalist. He worked hard, he reached out to some people. That's what we're going to do. Number 2, independence. If there's any independents here, people are sick of the good old boy politics. There's no one in the state who has sponsored more ethics reform legislation, or campaign finance reform legislation, or more oversight legislation than I have. We passed the Inspector General for the city of Albuquerque. I passed the legislation that the voters then passed that had public financing for local elections, which all 3 mayoral candidates used to run last time, including one who opposed the legislation. And number 3, so independence. People who just want good, accountable government in the general. Democrats, Republicans, they're going to support someone who has a record on that. And then finally, I don't talk enough about this, but most of my career has been spent on the economic side of the aisle, creating jobs. I was the Assistant Secretary for Economic Development. I was Chairman of the State Economic Development Commission. I was a small business owner for 5 years. That's how I paid my mortgage. So jobs are important, and I'm going to fight for jobs. Good jobs. Green jobs, which we should be transitioning to, and making sure that Sandia and Los Alamos find a long-term mission that's more sustainable, that's less dependent on the nuclear proliferation, and that's more dependent on creating jobs in the green sector and commercializing those technologies. That's how we're going to create jobs. And the last thing on jobs and why we're going to win the general is because I actually have a real plan for investing in jobs. Tom Udall said we need to spend $4 trillion, which is a lot of money, on infrastructure. I'm saying let's spend at least what we spend in the Marshall Plan, Those of you who remember, after World War II, we invested, in today's dollars, about $1.5 trillion rebuilding Europe's infrastructure. Well, why not put people to work here, creating jobs by rebuilding our transportation infrastructure, coast-to-coast broadband, wireless, so people can work in rural communities, and really bringing renewable energy online. We need to build that infrastructure. The private sector is not going to build it. If we do that, people will go back to work, building that stuff, but more importantly, we will set the table for future job creation, right? Because people then will work in renewable energy and can benefit from broadband and can commute to work. So I'm the only one in this race who has a jobs plan. So, and I'm serious about pushing it. So I ask for your support. Get involved early. We're already getting out there on field. I have a great team. Some of them are local, some of them are from out of town, but they're all committed to really us winning this for progressives and for core democratic values. Whether you want to call them progressive values or populist values, I used to call them democratic values. Things like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, a public school system that works for everybody, an opportunity that everybody can have the American dream, even a kid from Barelas who went to Head Start. So please join us, and please spread the word and tell people that we're going to win this. We're winning the primary, and we're going to win the general, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise. So thank you all very much.